Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat sermon by RabbI-Cantor Hillary Chorny.
This past Tuesday was Yom Ha'atzmaut. I was in a parking lot outside a cafe, sitting in the driver's seat of my car, and my head was bent over my phone, busying myself with just one last text message before I headed back to the office. There was a knock on my front passenger window. Kind-looking older gentleman was smiling at me. In the moment, nothing raised my hackles about his approach, so I rolled down the window and I greeted him. "What synagogue do you go to?" It took me about 3 syllables to figure out he was Israeli. "Beth Am," I said. "I go there. This is great. I need to give you my card," he said. Now, I did not think, in fact, that this man was our congregant. I had never seen him. And then again, maybe he was, and we'd simply never met. But in either case, I respected the schmooze, and what was the harm, really, in taking a business card? He passed it to me through the window. "I'm a contractor, solar. Please tell whoever is in charge." Now, I glanced down at the card, and the man standing in the sunlight and squinting into my car was completely bald. I looked more closely at the card. There was a picture of a man, a younger version of this man, who was sporting a pretty fantastic set of thick black curls. "This guy has a nice head of hair," I joked, pointing at the card. It wasn't a comment I'd usually make. It just kind of came out. Something shifted in the man's face. His jaw kind of squared. "I'm not bald," he said. "I shaved my head. Do you want to know why?" Yeah. Many, many years ago, I served in the Israeli Navy. I was so proud. I could not have been prouder. I was proud going in. I was proud coming out. One day, my unit was hit very badly. I lost 26 men serving under me. When they came to tell me this, how all these young men were dead, I couldn't breathe. The next day, I woke up, and my beautiful black hair had turned completely white from the shock. Many years I dyed my hair black. I couldn't endure the pain. To look at that white hair, to be reminded. For some reason, my hair started growing in more quickly these last few years. I'd dye my hair on a Thursday, and by Saturday, my wife would point out that my roots had grown back. I couldn't take it anymore, so I shaved it off. It felt so good to have it gone, so much lighter. In that moment, hearing this man's story, I thought of my favorite Yehuda Halevi poem. It's a piece that was written in the 12th century based on the enduring truth of our enemy's persistence. Sa'ar seva behera'ot yechidi, ale roshi ketaftihu v'yadi, hashivani yechaltni levadi, uma ta'aseh bevo acharai gedudi. A white hair appeared on my head alone. When plucked, it retorted in a mocking tone, "Me you defeated, but my platoon? What's your plan? 'Cause they're coming soon." This is what it feels like, actually, to face the tendrils of hate right now. White hairs cropping up like indefatigable weeds. Hate is pernicious. Somehow it finds sources of fuel everywhere. We rise up with our best armor against one abhorrent defamatory event, only to be tapped on the shoulder by another, and then another. There is no end in sight, no end date on the horizon, just a 5 o'clock shadow of hate that cannot be abated. Lately, we're counting the days down from Pesach until Shavuot, or, I don't know, maybe counting up. We mark these days of the Omer counting with resolve and promise because we actually know what's on the other side. Not just the glorious release of redemption from Egypt, but now the coming gift of Torah. On Pesach night, we sang, Vehi shehamida, lavotenu velanu, shelo echad bilvad amad aleinu lechalotenu, ella, shebechol dor vador omedim aleinu lechalotenu, v'hakadosh baruch hu, matzilenu miadam. Speaking about God, we say, it's not anything else. It is this that has stood by our ancestors and for us, for not only one enemy has risen up against us to destroy us, but in every generation they rise up to destroy us. But the Holy One, blessing be God, delivers us from their hands. At the Seder table, we sing with the blessing and the fortitude of hindsight. In this reenactment of the Exodus, we know the ending. God saves us. God delivers us as promised. But buried in those words of Vihisha Amda is a dark truth about Jewish existence. How far does God's promise to save us go? It goes as far as our enemy's determination to rise up against us. In other words, the size, the abundance, the might of God's promise to safeguard us is measured in the metrics of the size, the abundance, and the might of our enemy's will to knock us down. It is endless, infinite. Both are. God's love and protection is enduring. It's boundless as our adversaries, and as boundless as their will to rise up against our people. Endless divine love matched up against endless antipathy. As endless as the task of plucking gray hairs one by one as they rise to the surface. We are witnessing the fortitude of Jewish conviction meeting the fortitude of yet another micro-generation of hate. Some days, most days, it's like swimming against a riptide. It is an endurance sport. And endurance is the antithesis of surrendering to the tide. It is the refusal to accept futility. My grandfather, my father's father, Jules, lived until he was just days before his 103rd birthday. He was born in New York City and raised in a small town, Petersburg, Virginia, where his family owned the general store. Grandpa Jules was 14 the year the Depression hit. One day his family was warned that the bank was closing. So they hurried downtown to empty their account and move it across the street. And indeed, that day, the bank did close. The next day, the bank across the street closed too. They lost their store. They lost their home. That year, my grandfather also lost his mother. He and his father got on a train back to New York City to reunite with family. They bought the ticket with the last dollars in their pocket. And then Grandpa Jules lived to build 2 long careers and see 3 new generations sprout on the family tree. When he was 98 and doing apparently well, people would ask him, "Jules, how are you going to make it to 100? And in his sweet southern drawl and with laughter in his eyes, he'd say, "Well, I'm going to get to 99 and then I'm going to be real careful." Endurance is a form of defiance. Defying the odds, maybe, or defying the average lifespan. My favorite children's author, Judy Blume, told a story about her mother. My mother told me once that she had her talk with God every time she started a new sweater. "Please don't take me in the middle of the sweater." As soon as she finished knitting a sweater and it was blocked and put together, she already had the wool to start the next sweater so that nothing bad would happen. We aren't asking much, are we? Just that God not take us in the middle of the sweater. Endurance is sometimes as simple as survival. But there is nothing simple about surviving the claws of the enemy. Endurance is waking up when you know that you face another day of pain. My friend and colleague, Rabbi Amichai Lau-Levi, wrote that his father and uncle survived Buchenwald. He sat with them some years ago to hear the whole story of family survival. In the interview, he asked, "How did you hold on? With no known end date in sight, how did you not lose hope?" "Jam," my uncle responded. Every once in a while, one of the Russian prisoners would take pity on me and give me a bit of jam to lick. I waited for those moments all the time. My father then pointed at his brother. I had to make sure the kid survives. Every day was another victory. I survived for him. You see, when all there is the choice to live, despite those who hate and despite those who protest your existence, dignified endurance is a victory. Umata sebevo acharai gedudi. You've bested this obstacle, but what will you do when the rest of the troops arrive? We are bone tired, and we are wearier from the anxiety of knowing that beneath each outcropping of hatred, an entire mycelium network of hatred runs beneath. Stamping out just one instance of hate feels fruitless. There is so much more where that grew. Endurance takes endurance. The Kabbalists who overlaid divine attributes on each week and each day of the Omer would tell us that the 25th day of the Omer, is the nexus of Netzach, endurance. This is the day of endurance within the week of endurance. Netzach sheba netzach, the endurance of endurance. There's this piece of liturgy I especially appreciate that we say at the beginning of every single day. We start each day with an allowance to name that weariness is a part of our genetic makeup or our destiny or just the human Jewish experience. It is a favorite prayer of people like me, people who are not morning people. We thank God for opening our eyes, for making us the way we are, and for giving strength to the weary. Hanoten laya'ef koach. Rabbi Shimon Schwab, who lived until about 1995, he would look at this prayer with curiosity, noting that ayef is the word for tired in Hebrew. But here in the blessing we have ya'ef. What is this ya'ef? Besides the fact that it is an echo of the prophet Isaiah's language, Schwab sees this as a special kind of tiredness that requires divine intervention. When I am ayef, I am tired, but I can push through. When I am ya'ef, I have exhausted every last bit of my energy. That is the thing for which we are blessing God. When our reserves are empty, we are given the gift of a very specific strength, netzach, patience and endurance. There's a tagline that pounds like a current beneath the turmoil in Israel these days. Yachad ninatzeach, together we will be victorious. Chutz la'aretz, anywhere outside of Israel. That phrase might be better pointillated now as Yachad nanetzach, together we will endure. 25 days deep into the wilderness, 225 plus days deep into the wrenching uncertainty of the captive's stories, we wake up every day to start again with our God-given koach, the strength to endure even the most tiresome of travails. That Tuesday night, as the sun set on Yom HaAtzmaut, when the rest of my family was in bed, I checked for any signs of gray or white hairs. Couldn't stop thinking about it. And honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised. There were none, though. Just my tired face. My tired, improbable face. A product of generations of Jews who proved V'hi she'amda to be enduringly true. All I ask is for one more day to try. And of course, I ask God for that every day. How will I get through that next day? Well, I'll get through tomorrow, and then I'll be real careful. Yachad nanetzach, together we will endure.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.